we need to be exposed to something else other than simply the usual stuff, to get to understand, how others might think differently, but not radically differently. We're not getting, Ben Gavir to present his views here, but because it's despicable anyway, and there is no defense for it, and because it's insensitive. So bring someone understand that there's injustice happening to Palestinians, and understand the nature of the injustice, might disagree with us about the description of the injustice, but still acknowledge it, that it's massive, as all of that. And Israel should be looking at that as a condition for being able to defend itself in full right of self-defense. Is not allowed unless you redeem yourself first. So this kind of discussion, but doesn't agree with us, with the people, with most of the people here, on everything, and there might be significant disagreements, and that's the kind of discussion that might enrich our understanding of the world in these difficult times. Now, this was probably the error in judgment on my part, which is assuming too much ability on people to engage in that. Given that I know, I should have known that in this context, this would be difficult. But I thought it's an online discussion. It's an AUB. People don't like to listen to it, can simply ignore it. But that's the misjudgment. People are angry. People frustrated. Some people, in my opinion, want to be heroes on the cheap, because preventing what is labeled as Zionists in Lebanon is not that difficult. It's an easy task. You can do it. You can feel that you have done your duty towards the cause, and everybody is with you. If you are demonstrating in New York or Washington or Paris or London, even though there's no danger, maybe limited danger of being arrested or being harassed or being this, but not major danger, at least you are demonstrating in countries where there are a substantial number of people that oppose you. You have a kind of balance, let's say. If not even you are a minority, I don't know, depending on the country. But here in Lebanon, those people are against this type of discussion. They present themselves as resisting. Resisting what? So the state is with them. The de facto power of Hezbollah is with them. The civil society is with them. The society, civil or is with them. The whole society is with them. The people, the communities are with them. The religious ones, the non-religious ones, all of them are with them. There is no divide. So there's no heroism in preventing something like this. It's heroism on the cheap.
This podcast is made possible by the generosity of listeners and viewers like you. Kindly consider a contribution through Patreon or PayPal. Links are in the details box. Any amount is appreciated. And follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The handle, The Beirut Banyan. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And to stay updated with video releases, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. I'm Rani Shatar, and this is The Beirut Banyan.
Let me just start with what's most important nowadays, which is what's happening now in Gaza. And of course, we all watching this, and we all shocked by the horrors that are happening there. And many of us here ask, how come the world is not doing anything? It's in the sense we are asking a moral question. In the sense, how come what's supposed to be clear moral imperative to stop the war is not met with a similar response in Western countries. And of course, this usually results in, for most people, in the claim that there are no values in the world. So the West doesn't have any values. Of course, maybe some people think that the West doesn't have values, but maybe others have values. Maybe China has values. Maybe Russia has values. Few of them say that. They just simply say the West doesn't have values, which results usually in saying there are no values anywhere. And it's basically the powerful imposing their will. And this kind of cynical views, cynical about others, that they are not moved by values, and therefore values have no role to play in this world. Maybe it's not that because I want values to play a role. That's why, of course, I want them to play a role. I also think they do play a role. It's not like they don't play a role. Yet people are not driven only by values. There are many things, many noises, interests, misinformation, identity that come between the person or society and acting on that value. So you can put it this way: we are neither angels driven by values nor saints that nothing moves. We're not psychopaths or angels. We're some between. We might move sometimes towards being psychopaths when we engage in massacres and genocides, and we have seen this in Lebanon to a great extent. So we are not ourselves immune from that. The massacres that this country has witnessed, and others around us and beyond this place, are abundant. So it's not like the first time we see something horrific. But if we think that there's no room for values then in the world, then why should we have values ourselves? And this becomes a really horrible vision, because people think that if you have values, you just only act on those values. Not that these values play a role in your decision, but other things can come in. We all have values in the sense we don't want to see, babies being killed. But we can also, or people cheating or being corrupt, but we can sometimes get seduced. If we think, oh, everybody in this government is corrupt, somebody gives me a bribe, why should I not take it? Because it's going to go for nothing. Why? At least I can help my family with it. We give excuses for ourselves. We say, oh, they are bloody and they want to kill us. Why don't we kill them as well? So not because you don't have values, but you sometimes give yourself excuses. You make it easier for you to sin. People who sin, if you want to use religious words, and I'm not a religious person, people who sin are not psychopaths. Sin while they're aware of it. They lead themselves into a kind of acting against their values. So the question is, how come what we take to be totally unacceptable morally is seen to be supported, not only accepted, but supported, and not seen from the beginning as something wrong. And based on that, I thought, because I think things are complicated, especially in the context of wars and killings, and I can see how others might not agree with that description. Other reasonable people, not people who just want to defend genocide or defend atrocities or massacres. Not that they are right, but I don't see them as evil people who one cannot engage in discussion. And I see the other side as well. I see the way people react to the massacres in Syria, and they react differently to the massacres in Gaza. The same people who still not only don't respond to the massacres in Syria happen to Syrians, but also happens to Palestinians themselves. Some of them don't mind thanking or praising Bashshar al-Assad. Now I'm not giving here a kind of what about Assad? If he kills, then Israel can kill. No, I'm talking about sensibilities of people. How can I explain that people can genuinely be affected by the sights of the death of children and women and other innocent civilians in Gaza, but not moved equally by the death of other Arabs, even Palestinians in Yarmouk and other places when it happens? Why can't people see the suffering of the Palestinians during the camp wars here in Lebanon in the mid to late 80s, but moved by the Sabra and Shatila massacre, when the numbers of killed people is not different, and the horribleness of the situation is not different? It's not because people are immoral, But one has to ask these questions. Now, these are more psychological, about identity, but then there's another question, which is more philosophic, more about ethics. How do we judge whether a certain conduct in war or whether a certain war altogether is morally unjustified? There's a history of that. And maybe if one looks at that history of that discussion, as well as the concept that emerged in that discussion, the distinctions, maybe one can make sense of some of those who don't agree with us. And maybe engaging with them might teach them something and teach us something about that. Because if you shut the door towards those who disagree with you, even when they disagree with you with something that looks to you quite obvious and significant, is assuming that the others are just simply evil. And one shouldn't make that assumption without due diligence, without making sure. You don't accuse a person of being an evil without trying to see, understand, research, discuss. Now, I know not all the times are times where discussion and research is easy. But it's this time where we are shocked by the reaction that we need to ask the question, what are we confronting here? Are we confronting simply psychopath, evil people, or are we confronting a different narrative or a different conceptualization of the conflict, or a different... Now, I'm not talking about those who are, in a way, extremists. No, some extremist view can be considered evil. Now, doesn't mean that those who hold them are evil themselves. Then you have to see how can people who are not evil hold really evil views. And this question goes back, to the Nazi era, where how come Germans, normal people, commit all these things? It's not impossible for people to, normal people to commit heinous crimes. And that's, if you read, Hannah Arendt's book, The Banality of Evil, you can see make sense of that situation. But there's another question. If others are present to you in kind of what they take to be a moral defense of an action, or at least a different view of the moral situation, a different moral view of the situation you're confronted with, and you are willing to discuss it and present it in moral lights, I think it's important that you engage with this, even though we disagree. It's important because otherwise we are not opening the possibility for us to see things we haven't seen, or for them to see things they haven't seen. Now, you can discover later that this is not a genuine discussion, and people are just simply performing to defend something which is undefensible. They are lawyers for a client they know is a murderer, but they just want to defend the case. But I would assume that many are not, especially in the academic arena. Maybe are not. Maybe it depends how they approach their subject and how genuine they are. You can't judge in advance. But I think this kind of engagement is important. Remember, when Sabra Shatila happened, there was about 400,000 demonstrators in Tel Aviv. And when the Khan commission that investigated the massacre, the Khan commission was, if I remember, composed of few judges, maybe two judges, one general, and others, but the chief of Supreme Court was leading the investigation. And the investigation came up with the conclusion that Israel is responsible for the massacre because they control the area.
I think they found indirectly. I think
indirectly responsible.
Yeah,
yes,
and Sharon in particular was
indirectly responsible, but responsible.
And if I'm not mistaken, he had to resign as a consequence.
Yes, Now, the finding of the commission was that the Israeli army was indirectly responsible for allowing people to get into the camp whom they know they have the obligation to know, to protect, and they should have known that, given the history of the Lebanese civil war, that this is likely to happen, and given the situation where Bashir Ismail was assassinated, and this is something really big for that faction. And given all the baggage, historical baggage, and all the mutual atrocities and massacres and the behavior of those groups in the past, they should have known that. So they basically say, you are responsible, indirectly responsible. You haven't killed them. Suddenly the Israeli army have killed them, but the Israeli army did something which they should have known it would lead to this. And they hold responsibility. So in a way, now, then the government decided to not kick out Sharon from the government. I think decided to relieve him of being a minister of defense and give him just a position without any portfolio.
He exited politics for a long time after that.
But they gave portfolio which is not with no portfolio, just a seat in the government. Then people did not like that, and they came out 400,000 people in Tel Aviv. These are Israelis. These are not Arabs marching against Jews in Israel. These are 400,000 Israelis going out for the death of the estimates between 500, 400, and 1,300 or something like that. That's the estimate. It's not a small number, but definitely much less than what we have now in Gaza. The 400,000 came out to protest against, but they took to be a lenient thing, and I think there was a throw of a bomb in the demonstration, and some people were injured, including a son of a minister of Interior. So he was demonstrating against the. Now, maybe the sequence of events is, I don't remember exactly, but the basic thing is that how can we explain that society brings 400,000 for a massacre that now we are witnessing much more happening, on daily basis. Sorry, maybe I should correct that. It's not the same thing. I mean, the massacre there was people coming in and butchering people. Here, most people are killing in bombardment. Maybe people don't see a difference, but just for the description's sake, it's worth saying. But if Israelis are insensitive to the death of people, how can we explain that they demonstrated, that 400,000 demonstrated protesting the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, and holding the Israeli government responsible for that, indirectly or directly, but responsible for that? So we need to ask the question, because this means that these are not people who are insensitive to moral argumentation. These are not devils that we are dealing with. How come now they support the actions of the Israeli army in Gaza? Now, this is a more psychological, sociological, historical, but also moral perspective. What are the moral considerations that make you moved by something but not by something else? And here we're talking about the same thing. Death of Palestinians, and how the Israelis are reacting to it. And then we ask ourselves the same question. How come we are moved by the death of people in Gaza differently than about the death of people, the same people, Arab people in Syria? If you want to compare numbers, there are more than 1 million deaths in Syria. 12 million displaced people. Half of them left Syria and half of them displaced within Syria. Thousands and thousands of documentation about tortured people who died under torture. Not that people were not moved by it, but not by the same level we have now. I'm not saying that they should not be moved by the people now. I say they should have been moved by the people before. But the question is why? What are our blind spots, our moral blind spots? And then I want to bring this issue about, okay, you conduct a war. Does Israel have the right to defend itself? You get this all the time in the Western media.
In which media?
The Western media.
Western
and
media.
In the discourse of Western states. They start with the right of Israel to defend itself. Does Israel have the right to defend itself? Now, we want to discuss this issue. We want to discuss it by people who understand what is the right of self-defense is, have an understanding of the rules of war, of what justifies a war, what is called technically jus ad bellum. What are the conditions that justify somebody to defend himself or herself, or society to defend itself? It's a question that has a history, has a complexity in it. What justifies self-defense? That's one question. Does Israel have a right of self-defense? And usually nobody around discusses this. They simply, it's not clear to us, those who oppose Israel, oppose the action of Israel, are against self-defense or against this way of self-defense. It's worth investigating. Maybe we'll conclude that Israel has no right of self-defense. Given what's happened to the Palestinians, they only get this right after they restore justice. So if you stole to give a silly example, you stole my laptop, and I chase you and hold you and drag you to the ground to get my laptop, you don't have the right to defend yourself. You can have the right to defend yourself only after giving me back my laptop. If I continue beating you up, maybe you can say, okay, that's it. I gave you that. But I don't have the right to defend myself. So some people think Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself. It's a complicated question. But then the question is, does Israel have the right to defend itself in this way? Now, most people say no. But I would like to hear somebody who would say yes. Genuine argumentation, not because I can see how that person can convince me, but I would like to see how that person thinks, and maybe would there be some elements that might affect the way I see the situation. Not to the extent that I would agree with that person, but at least my moral vision would become more nuanced and sophisticated. But let me give an example of how this discussion can be quite interesting, and not only things are black and white and clear, there is no discussion. Any discussion about it is as if we are discussing, okay, is it okay to have slaves now? Now that people say, we don't have discussions about these things. Is it okay to execute the gays and lesbians? Of course, we don't invite people to have these discussions anymore now. So there are limits to discussions, of course. But then this is something which is not as easy. Some of it is not so clear. First, the one thing I mentioned, which is that they have the right of self-defense. Do they have the right to defend themselves against the attack in October 7th? Should they just simply do nothing and accept people to come and butcher them because they are unjust occupiers? What do unjust occupiers do? What rights? Do they have no rights, and therefore they should be allowed to be killed without any response? That's not an easy question. Nobody has answered. It's not clear to us. Oh, of course. If you ask me, should people have the right to own slaves? No, of course not. I mean, there's no ifs about it. But if asked, do the Israelis have to simply surrender to the people attacking them, and that's it? I don't think anybody has given this no. Even if they say they deserve it because they occupy, but they say, okay, but do you think that the right defending themselves is wrong? That they should simply see others killing them and they should do nothing because they are guilty? It doesn't look that easy. Not similar to the case of owning slaves. So some discussions are still interesting to hold. And then the question is, suppose they have the right of self-defense. What would be the kind of military action they would take, and what kind of death toll they are allowed to inflict on the enemy? Not only the enemy combatants, but also the enemy civilians. Is there an infliction of death that is justifiable as self-defense? If the whole operation would have caused 5 deaths of civilians, would that be okay? Or even 5 civilians is not justified because you're killing civilians. 5 children, let's say, it's not justified. You can see their photos and you can see how horrible this is, and their parents devastated by this. So you might say, okay, if they have the right of self-defense, what right do they have? When does it become unacceptable for Israel to continue fighting? After killing 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000? Of course, the more you get, the more becomes unbearable and unacceptable. Is there a measure of, or Israel have no right to kill anybody that's not a combatant? So these questions are important to evaluate the action. And this is what I thought to bring people. And the event was the first of a series of events by people of different views on this. The next speaker was supposed to be somebody who has a professor in Oxford who has signed a letter with a group of professors in Oxford calling on Rishi Sunak and Starmer, the head of the opposition, leader of opposition, to call for a ceasefire immediately. So these are the people who are asking for what all of us are asking, most of us are asking, people here are asking to have a ceasefire. And it was supposed to come next and I have to cancel this as well, because I would think that now there is assumption that, I'm bringing these defenders of Israel, even if I'm bringing somebody, unless I bring, somebody who is like clearly, has a non-academic with a profile of, I want to bring academics that people don't know here. And those academics actually don't have fixed views on these things. They update their views. Sometimes people write on war ethics who write sometimes about current affairs. They say, oh, we accept this war that Israel done, but not that one. This action, but not that action. So it's much more nuanced that. Or we accept resistance in this way, but not in that way. So it's not something that people have a fixed position. That's like I'm a pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli all the way, no matter what happens. So people don't know the position of these people. So you have to kind of represent them as, you have to assure people this guy is not going to say anything that is you don't agree with, which is very difficult, because if you want to bring discussion, you're going to bring people who you disagree with. You want to hear people you disagree with to a certain limit. You don't want to hear people defending slavery, but you want to hear people saying something different than what you hold, and not necessarily join the chorus and sing the same song. Academically, this is not fruitful. It's boring, and it doesn't really enrich your understanding of the world. The reaction in Israel and the West was this unprovoked attack. And of course, the response that this was not unprovoked attack. There's a history to it. There's a context. These people have been subject to injustice for a long time. So you can't say it's unprovoked. It is provoked. I'm saying that what differs if it wasn't? What would be the difference if it wasn't provoked? Let's assume another scenario where the attacks was not provoked. What would be the victim of such attack? What rights do they have to respond? Of course, they have that to defend themselves because the attack is unprovoked. There's no history of injustice. They go in and want to eliminate the militias that did this attack, because the militia not only did this attack and said last time, they said, no, we are going, this is how we operate. So don't think that this is the end of it. We're coming back to you. So they have the right to defend themselves, and they have the right to eliminate that militia. Now here we're talking about a different scenario than the Israeli-Arab conflict. Totally unprovoked. So they go in. How much? And they have to shell and bomb and move inside condensed area. Let's assume the same thing in Gaza. How many people are they allowed to kill as collateral damage in this? Do they allow them to kill as much as? Of course, they try to minimize killing. Let's assume, but they have to kill because it's a condensed area. I'm sure that an unprovoked attack, defending against unprovoked attack, you are allowed to do more than if you're defending against an attack that has been a result of past injustice. And if they're defending themselves in a context where they've committed injustice in the past, how does this restrain their action? And to what extent? You might say we don't need to get into this in this argumentation. It's clear that this number is 10,000 is unacceptable. We might agree on that. But then the question is, what would be acceptable? If they stop at 5,000, that would be acceptable. Most people say no. 1,000 would be acceptable. 500 would be acceptable. Now, what if somebody thinks 10,000 is not unacceptable? Unless you have an argument for where you draw some line, or what are the considerations for judging whether this is too much or not. It's an interesting question. It's not an easy answer. If the answer was easy, that straightforward, then we could just simply say there's no point of getting scholars to debate about something which is so obvious. We don't bring scholars to debate slavery, whether we should have slaves or not. That's, again, I go back to slavery, because people say that some things, debating them is wrong in itself. And I agree, some stuff. And this depends on the context. If I teach, homosexuality, ethics of homosexuality, is there something wrong with homosexuality? Here, I do this when I teach my ethics courses. I give as one of the examples. I give several examples. One is about poverty, because I like to know how is it justifiable for us to live in a world where people are dying as a result of not having access to basic needs? Is that our lifestyle is justified when people are living in that way? The other one is war, the ethics of war. And the one is because I add something relevant to our region about homosexuality. Is there something wrong with homosexuality? Because I know the context here is not, there's a debate about this matter.
And these all fall under ethics. These are just different.
Yeah, you can ask any question about, ethical question about something. You can ask question about whether you should eat meat. You can ask question, we should use your car. Whether you should. So, but these ethical questions applying. Is it morally justified? Is something morally wrong with being homosexual? Right?
And sorry, just to go back to the beginning, you were mentioning the beginning more along the lines of value.
Yes.
Are these synonymous?
Ethics and values. Well, yeah. I mean, you have values that are not ethical. Aesthetic values are not ethical. Whether a painting is elegant or have a nice, good composition, or whether a dancer is graceful or something. That's not that's evaluative. You can say this movie is boring. That's not ethical judgment of the movie, but it's the aesthetic judgment of the movie. So you have value judgment that are not ethical, but of course, all ethical judgment are judgment of value. You are making a value judgment on the thing, right. But it doesn't exhaust all value, all values. Yeah. You can say, oh, this is an elegant proof of a certain theorem.
Yeah.
It's a value judgment on the proof, but that doesn't. It's not a moral value.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So, morality goes more into ethics.
Yeah, morality and ethics I use them as synonymous.
I see.
Some people make a difference out of them. I don't think there's a reason to.
Okay.
Sometimes for particular purposes, people want to make a distinction, but I think I usually, many people treat them the same way. So in a way, when I teach, back to when I teach homosexuality here, because I know there is a debate, there's a discussion here about some people in my classes don't approve homosexuality. Some do. Yeah. And this has been changing, by the way, through the years. How the percentages. But I present this case because I know there is a debate in my society about this. There's discussion here, and I want people to be clear about all the relevant considerations, and give time to express each view, and then go into it. I have my own answer, of course, but I try to avoid imposing it. But I still, engage in argumentation and allow the students to engage in argumentation. Of course, I am in favor of giving, homosexuals full rights to be treated and behave and live like heterosexuals in both sexes. But I think this is worthy of this discussion.
I like that I like the way you outlined that. You have your own conviction, and it does match, I think, what a lot of AUB students, I would say probably the majority today, believe in too, and that you have an opinion that reflects, I think, a changing mood anyway in society, but you're not interested in sharing that. You're interested in constructive debate with or without that opinion.
Yeah. So in a way, I've seen a change not in society. I would say I've seen change in AUB students.
That's better said. Yeah.
Because when I go to my village, with the same age group, and I ask them the same question, the same age group I have in my class in AUB. I don't see that change. So the change is among people who are more exposed to Western. They're more Westernized in that sense. Because after all, let's not kid ourselves. The demand for gay rights and lesbian rights is coming mainly from West and adopted also by people outside that. But it's the main drive. The countries are leading in achieving that kind of sexual
just to go a bit further on the tangent, I'll bring it back. I think the politics of it have been imported, but the the demand for
Yes,
tolerance.
no. I'm not saying that it is invented. I'm saying that those who think that we should give rights to gays and lesbians, must admit that the battle was fought first in Western countries,
Right.
and now we're fighting the same battle,
Right.
and we are using the achievements there as a ground for it. I'm not saying that it's an invented problem.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but some people might say it is. But my point was not about the issue of homosexuality aside, but that if I was teaching this course in the West, in the UK or the US or Australia, I wouldn't include homosexuality in the list, because there, more or less, the debate has been settled.
Yeah.
And this shows in the laws they have enacted. It's legally, you cannot discriminate against gays and lesbians.
You don't think it would still be worth pursuing as a discussion anyway, even when the case has been.
And if somebody says, okay, I want to discuss this, and I wrote a paper on this, defending, and as I can choose a paper to write on topic, and somebody student, even in the UK, decides to write on against homosexuality.
And I mean that more like it's like an intellectual exercise, not.
Yes, I would not say no, not allowed.
Yeah.
Of course, but I wouldn't choose a topic that is being settled.
Okay, I see.
So now, do we think that it's settled in the world how we evaluate the Gaza war? In the world, maybe it's settled, but there's a debate in the world about it. It's interesting. There's this agreement, at least, and each side says it's outrageous what happened. The Israelis are going around the world showing the edited movie of the atrocities and Jazeera and others showing the other side, and they claim that they have a right. It's worth discussing. What are the limits of that right? What are the limits of the Israelis defending against the attack? What are the limits Palestinians, the victims, the original victims, defending their cause? Are there limits to what a victim can do to the victimizer? Are there limits to what the victimizer can respond to something that the victim done beyond the boundaries of what the victim should be allowed to do? If we think that is, even here in this part of the world, there are people who say what Hamas did was heroic, was great. We give ba'lawas next day. And some people think, no, it's not good. Maybe these are minorities, but still, But Israel is also not justified in the response. Now, is there a debate here? Is part of what goes into that debate has been looked at by those kinds of philosophers of war. Philosophy of war is not a justification for killing. It's actually asking under what conditions and what circumstances you're allowed to use violence, and what are the limits of that violence. And it's a rich discussion and has been evolving, especially in the last 20 years, the theory of what's called just war theory. And the whole point of that series, which started by the cancelled, was supposed to be started by the cancelled, was to...
Oh, that was the first. That was the first.
It wasn't announced as a series, but it was meant to be a series. Already had booked 2 people, which I'm coming to cancel now. Maybe some later maybe some later time I will just initiate something which we should. Maybe when things are calmer, when people can reflect on things. But that's the idea. The idea is to bring out these types of questions in a context in an academic context, but it's not only for academics. It's meant to address a question that's pertinent to everybody. But of course, the type of discussion, and for it's in English, and it's going to be a bit technical in some form, because the just war theory can get pretty technical in that sense. So it might be. We try to avoid that in this series because it's open to the public. But the idea is to contribute to that understanding about something which is not settled. Even if there's a risk that he might have said something we all don't accept. What happens if you have the situation is you're not taking a huge risk. You can always respond. You can always object. object strongly, reject in a discussion and say, well, no, that's not acceptable. It's not like nobody will die as a result of that. The harm to our ears of hearing that is not the risk of hearing something we don't like is a lesser risk than the risk of not of suppressing freedom of speech. So that it's not like you're certain this person is going to say these things. Just in case, I'm not going to allow you to talk. Just in case you say something which is not acceptable. That kind of risk-averse behavior to something they don't like to hear is unhealthy. There's some risk that I hear something which I don't like, but there's also a chance that I may hear something which is interesting, I haven't heard before, engage constructively with you. Now, we want to get some indications about the speaker. I tried to assure my colleagues, some of them were objecting that this person is not going to say something what you are thinking about. It's not going to justify the killing of babies, of course, nor the actions of Israel as it is happening now. Let me say something about the speaker so that you say the profile. He describes himself as, if I want to describe him, he's what you now have as a typical current leftist Jewish professor. And this type of people, for some time, they have been very critical of Israel, especially Israel under Netanyahu. So these are the ones who are putting pressure on the American government not to support the Netanyahu government. So this is the kind of the leftist Jewish.
In DC terms, like the J Street type of think tank.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the J Street type people.
Yeah.
Also, the J Street are not all one manifesto, but they have.
I know this word may not be complimentary, but the peaceniks.
Peaceniks sometimes.
Although he's an American Jewish philosopher,
exactly. But
lumped.
it's in the not Israeli, it's not Jewish.
Exactly. Yeah.
So. And they take it themselves that this is good for Israel and for the Arabs to stop supporting Israel the way it is behaving now. So he belongs to that kind of camp in general. Now these people would if you ask you, are you Zionist or not? Most of them simply say, yeah, of course, I think there should be a state of Israel should stay. But they distinguish themselves, and this is what he describes. He says, I'm not a radical Zionist. I'm not anti-Zionist. I'm a moderate Zionist or pragmatic Zionist. So by this, he understands this to be that, okay, Israel, the abolition of Israel is not something we accept. The one-state solution is very unrealistic, given the level of hatred between the two communities, which we see now manifested. Putting them together in one state with equal weight or whatever, it will result in civil war. It will be a war first of birth rates. If you're going to have democracy, who has more kids? And of course, now we have the Orthodox Jews and all of that. They also to having kids, and so it's becoming a war of birth rates, and then turns out at some point might turn out into a real war. So and think of democratic politics. We know that from Lebanon, and we don't hate each other as much as we don't have a past bloody history as much as we do have actually quite a bit of it. And you might have something way worse if you suddenly move into a one-state solution. Then these people make this argument. So the one-state solution is not realistic. Eliminating Israel is not acceptable. It will also be disastrous to people. The only solution is a two-state solution. So they tend to favor a two-state solution. They are anti-settlement expansion, and they want to reverse some of the expansion that happened in the past, especially in the last 20 years. And they are in favor of maybe some of them might say Jerusalem as East Jerusalem state, capital state. And they accept the injustices happening to the Palestinians in the past, including at the establishment of the Israel. So this guy acknowledges that there are about 800,000 were displaced by Israel, and that is an injustice that has to be dealt with. He doesn't say that it will be dealt with only by right of return. It could be dealt by compensation. So that's because right of return is another way of creating the same problem of. Now we might disagree with him on the right of return and compensation. At least this is the position: two-state solution, against settlement. East Jerusalem is a capital of the Palestinian state. It includes Gaza and West Bank. And that's the kind of vision, which is not outrageous. You might disagree with it, you might accept it. It's not outrageous at all. It is part of the mainstream Arab societies, including the 2000
2002 Arab League Summit.
which had everybody approve it, including the Syrian regime at the time. And all of the, so it's
Signed here.
yeah, signed here. So it's not like something which is we see as unacceptable. Some people object to it in the sense that Israel did not leave a room for it by what it did since that time.
But could I play with this a bit? Does it really matter what he thinks or how he feels about his own identity? The man is an American Jewish philosopher. He's not Israeli. And he's been tasked with a philosophy examination of war ethics with a case study that's of an issue that matters to all of us. I don't think it even matters how he feels. I mean, he has the right to make bad decisions too and still be invited to talk.
In the talk that he was supposed to present, he sent a copy to me since that event was cancelled. And I knew what he was going to say in general because we discussed that with him, because I want to have some idea about and I know the writings of that person. Is a sophisticated philosopher, and he's also a professor of law as well. So he's well versed on these topics. And of course, but we can have all kinds of views. And then I wanted to see what is the approach, because I know the audience here, and I want something which is sensitive to the audience, not something that the audience would agree with. I don't want somebody comes and says whatever the people here say will say. That will not be interesting. But somebody who disagrees but sensitive to the...
Not a Norman Finkelstein type of...
Yeah, you bring Norman Finkelstein or they will clap. Want something, to be exposed, to see how... To be challenged, to challenge them and to be challenged by them. So, but I don't want something so totally insensitive to the perception. So,
absolutely.
So, and this person, in his talk, he addresses the question like this. Given that Israel has committed all these injustices in the past to the Palestinians, what kind of right does it have to defend itself against October 7th? And in what way? So he pressed with that premise. Not with the premise of we are have a clean sheet and those barbarians attacked us. He says, no, we have done the injustice to the Palestinians, and now we have done what the Palestinians did to us is unacceptable in October 7th. What can we respond in light of the fact that we have caused them injustice in the past? So we continue to do that. He thinks that the injustice in the past, before this war, was mainly in the West Bank and not in Gaza. He thinks that the blockade in Gaza is a result of Hamas actions. That's the narrative he gives. But he thinks that what's the injustices happening to Palestinians are mainly and quite substantially in the West Bank, because they are taking land for no justification.
So this reference that he makes about himself as a moderate Zionist, is that simply just the way he described himself earlier to a different audience?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. They have some posts.
Yeah.
Connection to a discussion. I haven't looked at the Facebook,
right?
Because in Facebook you're responding to someone.
Yeah.
Maybe you're responding to another Israeli who's you're responding to another Palestinian. Maybe responding to a colleague.
So he was trying to redefine Zionism on his terms, which I think is how most American Jewish philosophers would probably identify themselves too. So it's a matter of trying to find the right appropriate voice in that camp to best reflect that position. But was there any moment on your side where you saw that and felt that this could lead to a outrageous backlash? Did you ever see something?
Yes, I didn't see those posts. I know about his views. If I saw those posts, I would have maybe thought of, that's not...
Okay.
That's going to be misread by people here.
Right. But you had no indication of that prior.
Prior, because I know his views. His views are not... you wouldn't label them Zionists if you read them. Or moderate Zionists. I understand what moderate Zionist means, and I understand that many people in Israel, the peaceniks in Israel, are not anti-Zionist. Some of them are anti-Zionist.
And he's an American Jewish philosopher, so it's an American's understanding of that word. But
let me give you an example of another.
Sure, I just need one thing. Was it all smooth sailing in your mind? No. So there was hesitation.
No, it wasn't smooth sailing. I knew that I was presenting something uh, something controversial.
Okay.
Something that is not, people say, oh, because I know the atmosphere. The atmosphere now is, we don't want to hear anything other than, But I thought, and maybe that was my mistake, is I thought that we need to be exposed to something else other than simply the usual stuff, to get to understand, how others might think differently, but not radically differently. We're not getting, Ben Gavir to present his views here, but because it's despicable anyway, and there is no defense for it, and because it's insensitive. So bring someone understand that there's injustice happening to Palestinians, and understand the nature of the injustice, might disagree with us about the description of the injustice, but still acknowledge it, that it's massive, as all of that. And Israel should be looking at that as a condition for being able to defend itself in full right of self-defense. Is not allowed unless you redeem yourself first. So this kind of discussion, but doesn't agree with us, with the people, with most of the people here, on everything, and there might be significant disagreements, and that's the kind of discussion that might enrich our understanding of the world in these difficult times. Now, this was probably the error in judgment on my part, which is assuming too much ability on people to engage in that. Given that I know, I should have known that in this context, this would be difficult. But I thought it's an online discussion. It's an AUB. People don't like to listen to it, can simply ignore it. But that's the misjudgment. People are angry. People frustrated. Some people, in my opinion, want to be heroes on the cheap, because, preventing what you label as what is labeled as Zionists in Lebanon is not that difficult. It's an easy task. You can do it. You can feel that you have done your duty towards the cause, and everybody is with you. If you are demonstrating in New York or Washington or Paris or London, even though there's no danger, maybe limited danger of being arrested or being harassed or being this, but not major danger, at least you are demonstrating in countries where there are substantial number of people that oppose you. You have a kind of balance, let's say. If not even you are a minority, I don't know, depending on the country. But here in Lebanon, those people are against this type of discussion. They present themselves as resisting. Resisting what? So the state is with them. The de facto power of Hezbollah is with them. The civil society is with them. The society, civil or is with them. The whole society is with them. The people, the communities are with them. The religious ones, the non-religious ones, all of them are with them. There is no divide. So there's no heroism in preventing something like this. It's heroism on the cheap. In that way. So why I thought maybe that's my mistake. Heroism on the cheap is very attractive, especially if you feel unable to do much other than that. It becomes a way to vent out your, being paralyzed to some extent. Paralyzed not only about Palestine, but paralyzed about your country, paralyzed about everything around you. So this comes an occasion where you unleash your powers against, in this case, the totally powerless. So I'm not an empowered person in that context. I'm taking a risk by getting this person. Turns out to be the wrong kind of, maybe I took too much risk in that. But I'm not somebody that you have to bring your courage to resist in Lebanon. So in that sense, there's no courage in it. And of course, that alone, that I was trying to do something which is not against the interest of the people who are going to listen to it. There's a chance to respond to interact, presenting somebody who has a level of sensitivity to the views and the conditions of the people in this region, especially the Palestinians. So in a way, it wasn't something which is done simply to create controversy. I didn't want to create I wanted to have interesting discussion, but I was aware it might create some controversy. I wasn't aware it would go that far. I'm not avoiding controversy, but I'm not doing it because of the controversy. I do things that are not controversial at all in my work. No? I've done, we've done workshops on teaching ethics in schools. And we brought teachers from all kinds of schools, from Mabarrat, from public school, to do how to teach values like, honesty, and because the existing curriculum in Lebanon is very primitive in that respect, so we want to encourage that. So it's not like the only thing that interests me. I'm interested in teaching ethics in schools more than actually discussing ethics of war, because I think ethics in schools is very important, because that's where you build the base. But you also want to do things that are on the edge of things, that create a discussion among people who they might disagree with some of the views presented. And this is one case, and one important case, because we live in a region, we have lots of wars, but we have limited understanding of the moral complexities of wars. And there's a big literature that is actually quite interesting and important. And why not expose us to it, especially that we're going through this difficult time of how can we understand why the world is not doing something towards Israel that's going on and killing Palestinians. This is a question that requires understanding how other people think, to understand how come they don't do anything. Is there something that makes us understand? Is there something really there, or just simply they are evil people? And that's a question that you can only know if you expose yourself to what they say. At least some of them who appear to us as reasonable. Now, of course, the case of this guy is not approving of Islam, but the moral complexity he brings in might make us understand why others might see it differently. Not in the case of that person, but that guest would have brought in the complexities of that discussion, and people will be aware of certain things that have not thought about before. I see this as my duty as a professor who does ethics, as a citizen, as somebody who cares about violence and the impact it has on people's life, so people can think about these things and reflect on them, so they can take a position when such things happen that are informed, sensitive, and aware of the complexities. So in a way, that was the whole point of it. But again, I tell you, maybe it was the wrong time. Maybe but that doesn't mean that the people who canceled it were not wrong. My judgment about them that they are wrong is not, changed. Has not changed. I'm not justifying their action by saying that maybe the timing was wrong. The timing was wrong because I didn't expect this kind of reaction. Not that it's totally surprising, but I wasn't expecting it to go that far. I should have, but not because I think the reaction was justified.
I've known you in an academic way longer than in a friendly way, but I've known you for nearly 20 years. I've been running into you for about 2 decades, whether it's on the streets of Hamra or literally on campus, or even, and this is going back now some 15 years ago, roughly, having you be one of my supervisors for my master's degree. So I got to know you better, and it sickened me to see AUB students or the community or whatever eagerly chanting your name and that you're a Zionist. It felt so, you're saying cheap, and it's almost like a heroically, what was the phrase you used? Cheap heroism? Is that right? Cheap heroism is maybe happening all the time for every single cause that every student at some point believes in. and they think that they're doing something about it. I'll take cheap heroism. I think I may even fall prey to that sometimes in believing I'm doing the right thing when it could be more selfish. That wasn't cheap heroism. That was slander. That's demeaning. That's accusatory. And you said it already. That phrase in Lebanon, even though we throw it around, because it maybe, like you said, widens the audience. It's not just that. That's bordering violence. And there are chants where having your name cursed or almost canceled, and then a Hamas leader's name elevated in the same context, it's intolerable. It has no place at AUB. So I will push back. The timing is bad because this war is happening. There's a reason why you would want to pursue this kind of series, and that's the first of others. It's not your fault that the war started a month and a half ago, and you're trying to make sense of it. So no, the timing has nothing to do with you. I think it would be a disservice if you weren't trying to push academia as far as it can go at AUB, because that's what I associate you with. And I think that's the flexibility of someone in your shoes, in that you're a popular professor, and people, I think, expect to learn from you, not to be massaged. Now, whether or not that guest is the right guest, and whether or not students are happy with the guest's choice, there are so many other ways to protest that. You could even protest it during the conference itself. It could actually reach a point where the guest opts out. And you know what? Fine. If students are unhappy, let them express it.
By the way, let's miss one correction. The main objection initially comes not from students, from colleagues.
Well, let's go there then.
Not in philosophy department. One of them in philosophy, but most of them were from other departments.
So you correct me as I say it. So I saw videos of students,
Yes.
what seemed like student chants.
Yeah.
But you're saying colleagues are the ones that.
So what happened is that when you do an event in AUB, you send it to the list of professors. We have a list in AUB that includes all the professors and all the instructors and all those who teach in AUB. So you send the announcement, and some people have the right to say something, and some people started objecting to the. And I started responding to the objections, explaining and all of that. And then the tone starts to increase. They found these quotes somewhere. Some of them were he described as moderate Zionist, and say, okay.
Sorry, this is within the AUB chain.
Chain of list by professors.
Right. So this is not public information.
Yeah,
This is
yeah. And then the echo chamber started to become louder and louder, and people started to say, "We want to cancel this. We are protesting against this. Shame on you," stuff like that. So some people sending photos of rockets and stuff like that. The Israeli rockets. So it becomes more like as if that's part. This is part of inviting this person is just part of the effort to kill civilians in Gaza.
And Bashshar, these are colleagues?
Colleagues, not in the same field, but these are colleagues in general. They are people who teach in AUB in some capacity or another. And I started to explain, and I responded to some of the emails that I felt are addressing important issues and points. So I tried to respond to some of them. I didn't respond to most of them because I didn't have time. And I felt that some few were supportive, but not many were participating. I haven't counted the money. Maybe most were silent. Some of those participating were supportive. Some were actually participating in the echo chamber in the course, and I gave my opinion, and then it started to leak into the social media and to the student clubs and those. So I don't know which clubs, Palestinian Cultural Club or the South Club or whatever, but it leaked to the students.
So that's meant to be a private chain. That's not something that anyone can access. I could not get into that.
No.
So there is a deliberate.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They said to the students, "Look, this guy is bringing this. Let's do something about it." Who did it? I don't know. But obviously, so the students not even privy to the discussion that happened. not to my responses, not to the. They just send this post that he has Facebook or Twitter. It's coming as a moderate Zionist, pragmatic Zionist, and then it went crazy. So that kind of it's not like the students were part of a discussion. It's not like I was giving a class and I said, okay, I'm going to bring this guest and I explained that what the guest is going to say, and the students say no. The students just simply heard that a Zionist is invited to give a talk.
So it's even worse.
Yeah.
It's not student originated.
No.
So this is, I mean, I'm overstepping maybe, but is there, since it spiraled out of control very quickly, there was no proactive sort of clean this up quick, and so that you don't end up being the target of these protests. Was there any real sort of support for you, because this is clearly the wrong way to handle internal affairs?
Yeah, there was a support in the sense that the administration agreed with me, or they themselves were saying we should not cancel in the beginning the event. Should not cancel. And I thought to myself, better not to cancel. Why? Because the accusations are that this guy is going to come and defend the genocide in Gaza. And I know they're not going to do that. So if we cancel, the accusation stands, that as if we're accused of something and I withdrew because the accusation is right. The only way to respond is to have the event. People will hear what the person is saying. And then I can say to people, look, guys, go and listen to the recording. You have it there.
Yeah.
If you think it's wrong, you can talk later. But this is the recording. I'm not speculating about what he will say, but would have said it. Anyway, we're going to be accused of something. Might as well have an evidence against it rather than leave it hanging as a speculation.
And I think more people would be curious about the upcoming series. This would have actually generated.
So anyway, we can start the discussion, and people will go and listen to that episode and see what kind of discussion, and understand that it's not what people are talking, what we're saying. So this was mine. But then things escalate to the extent where there were threats. I would not know the nature of the threats to the university, but there were threats, and there were threats to me. Because when you shout, Sahyuni, Sahyuni, Bashshar Haydar Sahyuni, and Allah Bhayyi Muhammad Daif, you don't feel reassured. You don't feel, okay, that's a nice bunch, that people. Of course, I don't think EB students will actually kill or harm severely, because I think they care quite a bit about their future, academic future and work employability future. So they want to demonstrate without much cost to them, which is good for me. I feel safe that they don't want to ruin their future. But it might get outside, and it got outside and started getting, threatening messages. So people starting to call me from all over the place. Bashshar, are you safe? Initially, I wasn't so worried as much as the game when people are. So we're seeing these footages. Please leave Lebanon. Here we have a place for you in Paris. Here was a place for you in San Francisco. Leave to this, leave to that. So people starting, leave now. Some of the friends say, please, Bashshar, leave now. Because it looks like what they have been seeing in their mind is something serious, and therefore it might lead to someone, especially in this context of Gaza, that people might say, I cannot do anything. And this person who is Zionist here next to me,
I think that says actually something else, which is it just shows you how there's this very rich, deep support network that's informal, and you're loved among many here and abroad. And I think anyone who wants the best interest for you would offer their home, even if it's literally down the street from where you are. So I think that's a good thing. That's a net positive. But trying to look back, this all spilled out of control within a few hours.
Yeah.
So this is one day, and I think it was a Thursday. It was a Friday. So on a Friday afternoon, sort of out of nowhere, there's all of this commotion, and the event is canceled. AUB issues a statement and putting the onus on security threats they're receiving. But it felt, and this is my view, you may not share it, you could even tell me I'm wrong if you feel this way. It felt like it wasn't supportive enough of one of its own. It felt, this is my feeling. It's not your, I know I may be overstepping here, but my immediate reaction was, fine, if you want to cancel the event, cancel the event. I mean, it's not the end of the world. Cancel it. Fine. But at least be more proactive in saying, Bashshar Haydar is AUB. And I felt like there was this sort of acquiescence to the voices chanting slogans, and it felt like AUB was retreating, which is always a bad sign. Retreat when one of its own is being accused of things that are slanderous, there's incitement, and there's a faculty who's afraid. Forget whether or not it would ever turn into violence. And I share your sentiment. I don't think any student would touch you, Bashshar. And I don't think, this is my gut feeling, I don't think anything would happen to you anyway. Off campus, on campus, I think the whole momentum was to just kill the event, not to really harm you. And they succeeded. It ended. But I didn't feel reassured when I didn't see support for you that was open. It was very muffled. The right to debate is sacred. I don't know if that's the message. I think it should be far more protective.
Look, I don't share your harsh criticism of or like criticism, not necessarily harsh, of the administration, because they were very supportive throughout the discussion during the day. So they were listening, they were taking my
So sorry, let me rephrase it. I meant the public.
Yeah,
not private could be actually 100%.
Yeah. Now in the Republic, they haven't come out and say this is unacceptable. They said it is, this is a place for public debate and all of that. But the action I would expect later, will come later. The only action they took, which is not public to the society but within AB, is to stop the list, the academic list. So now we cannot send emails. Now it's symbolic because it shows that they are disapproval of the kind of accusations that were made in that list.
Yeah.
And this is the level of institution. And of course, shutting the list, as I understand, is not a permanent thing. They want to set guidelines for what the list, what should be allowed or not allowed in the list in that sense. So incitement of violence or hatred, all of that should not be allowed from now on. How they're going to implement it, I don't know. But this is going to be part of a discussion within the Senate of the university, which is an elected body of professors. But they took that position. And for me, it was a sign that the university is not canceling only the thing because of a threat of violence or harm, but also took a stand by shutting the list. Maybe one thing, this is not enough. There has to be a message to the public, not only internally, that what happened is unacceptable.
That is the wording that I didn't see written in a way that convinced me.
Yeah. So there was an action internally, which is not private; it's public. For the professors, and I think that some professors felt that they have gone a bit too far.
Who?
The people who were in the echo chamber.
Yeah,
Some of them felt that they have been too far. I think had not the AUB took that step, they would not have felt that. And I think they have done something. Of course, maybe more needs to be done in terms of looking back at this and saying, okay, understand the cancellation. You might say, but the reaction wasn't the public presentation of the cancellation is weak. And I think that the internal public exposure was the public as the professors was initial step was okay.
Not to speak on behalf of anyone, it's not that it's if there's incitement to violence, for me that's why don't you get fired? I don't think of that as.
I think this would have to.
So just come a little closer to the mic.
This would have to come after, if it's going to come after some kind of investigation. You cannot simply accuse people of inciting violence without actually having them.
Yeah.
So if that is going to happen, it's going to be part of a process. It will not be done. And you can't come and say, we'll fire people who, because you need to look at the case.
Yeah.
You're not making it. So it's a responsible university would have to make things. So I can see how their behavior is not weak. They are weak in a sense by the fact that they have been pressured into this because of the, maddening crowd of some sort. So they really need to react. They have to take a decision. And they took understandably, the less risky decision, given the environment that we are in. There is, in Western universities, especially American universities, what you call a cancel culture. People cancel speakers. This hasn't been always this case. This is a part of heightened sensitivity to hate speech. And this has become
sometimes not even hate speech. It's just problematic speech.
Yeah, sometimes it becomes to everything you don't like, you don't agree with, and you cancel the speaker. It's not like you cancel some far right mad person who wants to kick all Muslims out. So you just cancel anything that is not in your recognized set of theories. And this is a growing phenomenon, a new phenomena, relatively in the history of universities, the cancel culture. Because the previous experience with cancel culture in the past was the McCarthyism, where you could be kicked out because you are a communist. You're not,
or even, no, not necessarily. You could just be accused of being a communist.
Yeah, accused of being a communist. For being
yeah.
accused of being communist, being sympathizer to the Soviet Union, to this and that. So basically, you're kicked out. So it's a kind of McCarthyism, but not at the level of the state, but the level of academic institutions. And we are influenced by this. So our young professors, students who are exposed to these practices don't find them at all problematic to cancel left and right.
But this is not cancel culture, Bashshar.
Yeah, but let me just finish. That kind of cancel culture is joined with another atmosphere here, which is oppression by the mainstream societal attitudes towards debate and so in a way you'd think that, I know one of the demonstrators who want to cancel this is someone who is part of the LGBT community. And of course, you would imagine that somebody like that person would be, sensitive to oppressing people based on their stance, how they present. So in a way, they would be, and it would be sensitive to joining the wider street, which is the wider street is not favorable to that person's position. The people who were chanting against me were not LGBT friendly. Many of them were members of, but they're close to Hezbollah in that sense. So, or to the Islamists who also don't want, as we saw lately, to allow LGBT or lesbians to be present, to be living, to be not only not to have their rights, but they are against their existence as such. But the cancel culture is when in the campus, what it combines with the general public opinion, it becomes kind of way a monster. Because at least in the cancel culture in universities, you would at least be doing a kind of invite to protect yourself, a safe space for you in the university, which you can't have outside. So you want a safe space in the university. So you don't want people to say things that make you uncomfortable because you're exposed to this outside in the world. So you understand, you're protecting yourself because you are among like-minded people, understand how difficult this is to you, and therefore you want to create this kind of zone. Here you have the chorus outside and the chorus inside joined together. The you get, all kinds of people, the conservative Sunni and Shia, the leftist, the academic, all of them joining in one chorus, not to create safe space for people.
Let me
Threaten stay for people.
let me challenge the assumption. And I know exactly what you're talking about, and that phenomenon, which is really the last few years, mostly in U.S. Universities. I've always made the case that cancel culture will never take off in Lebanon. This country is so damn tolerant towards absurdity.
Yeah.
Yeah, in day-to-day life, the kind of triggering situations, I'm going to borrow from their lexicon in the US now, that people have tantrums over in the US today, and the sensitivity that has made a generation perhaps unfit for life there. In academic circles, Lebanese are strong, and they're tolerant and diverse and accepting for many, many things. And I would beg to differ on one thing. The cancel culture that you're describing, which fits, I think, a situation where people unfairly want to remove you from the scene. I don't think that was what was happening. I think really, at the end of the day, the Israeli response is so horrifying, and it's on our phones. And the average student on campus is taken away by scenes of pure misery. And people feel helpless. And people feel helpless in Lebanon for many things that are political, local, regional, sometimes the expectations that have been dashed repeatedly. And the post-October 17 disaster, I think it's just the worst stage for someone trying to have political action available. One thing happened. This seminar was going to go ahead. It would have caused maybe a few ruffles. Maybe some faculty would not have wanted to participate. Maybe students would have objected. It would have gone ahead. What happened, Bashshar, is that someone within the AUB community decided to throw you and Israel into the same phrase. Someone in AUB decided to take advantage of the situation and hurt you. And organizing students to do that is horrible. And the good news is that not many students showed up. And the good news is that the chance faded quick. And what are we now? We're recording on a Tuesday. I think most people have forgotten that this thing happened. Cancel culture, there'd be a protester at your door right now demanding that the student remove you now, and because of problematic language or problematic views. The one thing that happened, which is beyond all of our control, is that you were referred to as a Zionist. And that professor, foolishly perhaps, in one interview or two or whatever, referred to himself in a way that made sense to him, never thinking this would cause a philosopher pain in Lebanon, referred to himself how he defines himself, an American Jew who doesn't want to see the destruction of Israel. He's a moderate Zionist. That makes sense to him? Fine. That's not your call. It's not your burden. That's what happened. It's not cancel culture. It's actually slander. It's within campus, and it speaks ill, in my opinion. It speaks ill for what I refer to still as the only bastion of thought, debate, expression, which is AUB.
I think it's not.
I named my podcast after AUB, and seeing you for a moment afraid, to me, I know cancel culture. And I know what Zionist attributes is, and it's what I think too many of us deal with that are not at AUB. You're called Amil, you're called Sahyuni, and if it has some backing from otherwise perhaps problematic colleagues, it speaks more about them than anything else.
Let me maybe not disagreeing here, but we had in the past episodes like that, where people had to be stopped from teaching because, or leave, or because of the angry people outside. It happened with Jalal Sadiq al-Azam when he wrote Naqd al-Aql al-Dini. It happened with, I don't know, remember the name of a professor of history or theology when he presented the views of Thomas Aquinas.
That's true.
And
Yes.
Thomas Aquinas said bad things about Islam and the Prophet,
Yep.
and he was saying, this is what Thomas Aquinas, for those who
You're going
don't
back
know,
in AUB history now.
He's like a medieval Catholic philosopher, one of the most important ones, but he has negative views of Islam, as it used to be the case for all these medieval Christian thinkers. Saint Thomas Aquinas is a saint as well, as you wanted to say. And he presented the views of Thomas Aquinas, and outside it came to their ears that reached their ears as this professor is saying these things, not Thomas Aquinas. So they came to arrest him.
Yeah.
And people said, this is not him who said it, it's Thomas Aquinas. And they wanted to arrest Thomas Aquinas.
It's hard to do.
Which is a guy died centuries ago.
Yeah. But they got him anyway.
but he had to leave, and he left the country and never came back. So in those cases, there was no initiation from within the university by the faculty of that, which end up picked up by the outside.
Yeah.
In my case, it's a combination. The people, the professors, for them it comes natural, given the environment of cancel culture, to cancel talks. So the initiation come from that kind of cancel culture having a root here. It got picked up by the outside, which is not into cancel culture. It is into their fears, environment that's going on now. It could have been about something else, about convincing people, coercing women to become gays and lesbians to get a scholarship.
Yeah.
Could be everything. This one is more powerful, of course. But I'm saying that this is a where there's two things meet. Some kind of cancel culture attitude having a foot here among the faculty, meeting what you call the usual frustration in society that leads to these kinds of things. Frustration, misinformation, whatever you want to call it.
I agree with you if it's solely on canceling the event.
Yes.
But I don't think canceling the professor has become something mainstream, except for one person that we both know, who I think that could be a form of cancel culture, a la Lebanese, Samir Khalaf.
Yeah.
That could be both Lebanese context of religion and discrimination, perhaps, and then a general attitude that he no longer fits. That could be a form of cancel culture years ago, that before cancel culture was really something we referred to. That's the one example I think of. The one going back earlier, although he returned eventually, is Kamal Salibi, when he decides to go on his journey into theology and Israel is somewhere in Saudi Arabia. He's not canceled, but his credentials are questioned and he doesn't really have a home anymore where he belongs, albeit later it's fine. That could be earlier versions of it. I don't think anything that was happening to you was cancel culture. I really think it was just, I don't think people knew who you were. I think they found your name, they went with it. Didn't matter if the guest was Zionist or not. خلاص Bashshar Haydar Sahyuni.
I wasn't the one cancelled. The cancelled was the speaker. So in a technical sense, I was cancelled a different way by the fact that they gave me that label,
You were chased out of your comfort zone, and he was cancelled by default, but AUB cancelled him. So fine. That's their prerogative. I personally think it's a mistake. I think the strength would have been to go on. And I think they would have won the narrative at risk of these continued security threats.
I respect your view. I'm not so confident that this would have been the right thing for them to do. I'm not, it's too complicated to judge. So I cannot say they did the wrong thing. Would have been better if the option of continuing would come without a huge risk, of course. But I'm not in a position to assess the risk here. So
If you're not in a position, I'm clearly not either.
because these things
yeah.
are pretty difficult to assess. Risk assessment is very risky.
Fair enough. And you know what? I share that broader sentiment of fine, don't do the event, but stand up for your own. And especially when your own is not doing anything wrong. That's where, as an outsider, and I'm glad you shared this a bit, that as an outsider, the communication was missing that one piece that I was looking for. But it's good to know that there is something happening anyway inside. But I don't feel so comfortable about what is going on, not just in AUB, but in the wider discussion. And I think that's where the conversation maybe brings us together, is that there's no nuance. And you can go to events that have nothing to do with politics or the war that's happening, and it's become only this issue, and nuance is destroyed. It's blanket statements. It doesn't reflect well of society. And I think both of us have seen that marked decline, in that there's a lost narrative, which is moderation and sensibility. Now it's all extremism and applause. And I don't know if that's clearly beyond anyone's control. That's the context that we live in. But I see it seeping into the place that I thought was perhaps spared, which is AUB, which is where I met you, which is where I got to know many things that I wouldn't have outside of AUB. That's what hurts.
I want a life that's worth living, and the one that I find now is being engaged intellectually in the issues about the region, and I want to bring those issues in touch with a rich discussion about ethical issues, which is my area of interest. I want that to shed light on the things that really the challenges that face the people in this region, not because I'm patriotic or anything like that, because this is a passion for me, and I interested deeply in the affairs of, and I want to bring my expertise to shed light on that. So it's difficult for me. If I leave, it will be I will leave to think about the same thing somewhere else. But it's better to be here and think about them while you're here. I'm not deterred by these things, but I to some extent create controversies, seek controversies. I'm not the one who shies away this easily. This one, the reaction was too much, was more than I expected, and more than I would have liked to be part of my daily existence. Of course not. But I hope things will calm down, and I don't think there is a reason to quit at this point. Definitely these things make one's life more difficult, and one's profession was difficult. Now I have to think every time I want to bring something which the others don't like. Am I going to create a controversy? I'm going to create a problem. This doesn't make you able to function in the way you want, but it would still allow you to do something, I think, and I would like to do that. I enjoy teaching students. I enjoy writing about the things I write about. Unfortunately, most of my audience for the things I write are not in Lebanon. It's what I write in my profession as a philosopher. But and I want to bring part of that to the Lebanese audience, but it's not that easy. I mean, and maybe the most important reason why I wouldn't leave is because I'm a procrastinator and lazy. So it will take time to I'm not. I don't take initiatives in that sense of changing life.
Now I know you're not going to go anywhere.
So that's what, if you want assurance, it's basically being procrastinator and lazy. That would probably play the most important role, me not leaving AUB.
Thanks for listening and watching, and a friendly reminder to support this podcast by contributing through Patreon or PayPal. All links are in the details box. Until next time, I'm Rani Shatah, and this is the Beirut Banyan.